Hey guys, it's Bridget with Sandu Seed Company, and we're here in the garden, and in this video I'm going to be talking about bed turnover. Whether you're in cool season or warm season, this video is always going to be appropriate because when you turn over your bed, there's some key things that you need to do to make you successful in the following season. Now stick around because there's one thing you can't forget to do every time you turn over your bed so that the next season is as impactful and you have the biggest, most bountiful garden possible. Now if you watch the end, you know you're going to have all of the steps in hand to make sure that your process in turning over your bed is just like what we do on our farm and in our garden so that you can have a great garden every season. Okay, so I'm here in the garden and I have two garden beds that are just about done for the season. Now, if you're a total novice or a beginning gardener, you might look at these and say, how do you know that they're done? Well, it's important to remember that growing plants in the right season is going to make you the most successful. These are warm season crops. These are tomatillos that are out of control. And there's two reasons why I want to pull them. One, it's August. We're going into cool season. These are not going to do good in the next coming months. And also, I'm tired of tomatillos. I've made so much salsa. I've got it in the freezer. I'm over it. So I want to pull these out and put more seasonally appropriate plants in here and get ready for the next season. I also want to take these out because they're out of control. There's weeds that are hiding in here. They're starting to get that powdery mildew, so they're starting to become diseased. And so I want to pull them out for the health of my garden to make sure that these beds are as productive as possible. Now it looks like I got a little helper. Are you going to come help me? Are you going to come get to work? Come here. Here's a little future gardener. You going to help Mama? Huh? Say hi, world. Get your apple. Okay, we have to get back to work. I love you. So the first thing I'm going to do is take out any infrastructure that's in here. So I'm taking out all of the stakes and I'm going to cut back all of these plants down to the ground. The plants that are not weeds, I'm going to cut them down to the ground because I want their roots to dissolve or decompose in the soil because it's a good thing for the soil to have that organic matter. But if there's any weeds in here, I want to pull them up root and all so that I can completely get rid of them. So let's do that now. So by clipping these at the roots, they're easier to pull out. Just don't clip your irrigation. Done that a few times. Now, as I'm digging in here, I can find stuff I didn't see before. Like here's a weed that I want to take completely out because it is just gonna keep growing in here. So I get that out by the roots. So we've ripped everything out, and a big question that new gardeners have is how far to the soil do you cut a plant down? Well, here's a pro tip. In zone 9 and 10, a lot of plants will continue to grow if they're on drip irrigation, even well out of the season. I guarantee you these will start sprouting again, and I don't want that because I'm not gonna get very many tomatillos in the cool season, even if the weather is warm, because the days are short. And also a big thing is the shadows in my garden and in everyone's garden changes when you change a season. And so these beds will actually be much more shaded than they were. So they're not appropriate for a warm season crop like tomatillos. Now, let me show you, if I pull this out, look at all the good stuff that I'm pulling out too. I'm pulling out all of this good soil and I'm leaving a massive hole here. So instead of doing that, I'm going to cut it right at the soil level. That's gonna allow this to basically just decompose in place and leave a bunch of organic matter instead of pulling it out and making a big void in my garden bed. Now let's talk about mulch. I love mulch. If you watch my channel, you know I'm kind of obsessed with it. So every single inch of my garden is mulch to conserve moisture and to conserve temperature, to keep the temperature cool in our very hot area of the United States. So in your garden, if you have a garden bed and you have mulch on there, you're going to want to pull back the mulch to do your bed amending and your aerating. And the reason being is if you leave this mulch in here and you amend, like put compost on top, you're going to lose this mulch because it's going to become part of the layers of the soil. Now, spoiler alert, that's not a problem. In fact, that's the basis of lasagna mulching. Not a big deal. But if you have a small garden space and you don't have great access to a lot of free mulch, you really don't want to waste that product because then you have to put more in. So simply by pulling it back, I'm just pulling my mulch back and exposing the bare soil, I can work with the bare soil and keep this mulch and put it back when I'm done. Now, one caveat to that is the type of mulch that you have. You can see this mulch has pretty small wood pieces and it's mostly leaf matter, which means it can easily incorporate into the soil. Now, if you're buying mulch, especially if you're buying a product called wood bark, where it's actually like big pieces of bark, that's a lot harder to incorporate into the soil because think about how long it takes to break down. So in that particular case, you really want to pull that back and just leave that as a top dressing to your soil. All right, so let's talk about the next step, which is aerating your soil. This is really, really important. And the reason being is over the season, your soil is going to get compacted. And water from your irrigation or from hand watering is going to make those soil particles really squeeze together, which means there's less air. All aerobic life needs air. Soil is the exact same way. All of the things that we can't see in that soil, all the microbes and the bacteria and the fungus and all of that stuff, the little insects, they need air to live. And that amount of air in the soil decreases over a season as the soil gets compacted. So we need to aerate it. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. It's not something that you should overthink. It's very simple. You need to break the soil up to get aeration or air into it. Now, in a bed setting like this, we're not going to quote unquote till. We're not going to use a tiller. There's no need. The soil is actually pretty soft and pretty light. It's a good looking soil, but it's still compacted. So I'm going to use any tool I have on hand. You could use a shovel, you could use a hand tool. And what I'm doing is I'm breaking up the soil so that when I do water gets deep into the soil. Moisture penetrates all through it. I'm breaking up these, whatever little roots are in here, those are going to decompose and basically become compost. And I'm ensuring that all of the microbiology that is in the soil can thrive because there's two things that it needs to thrive: moisture and air. All right, now I know I said the really big bad word, till, and it's gotten a lot of notoriety in the gardening world. If you're a new gardener, let me just explain, this is not the same thing as tilling. The reason why tilling has gotten a really bad rap is because when you over-till, you break up the mycelium network, which is basically this web of microbes and fungus that's growing in the soil. And when you break it up over and over and over and over again, it cannot thrive. Well, this is still an important step because if there's no oxygen, it can't thrive anyways. Now, I'm not going to town. I'm not using a mechanical tiller that's like breaking this up. I'm literally just using light motions to break up the soil lightly. There's still going to be chunks in here. There's still going to be mycelium that's growing. And then also when we add in all of our amendments, our compost, our fertilizer, our compost tea, our worm castings, that is going to rejuvenate anything that was lost during this process of breaking up the soil. Now, remember in the beginning of the video, I said that there's one thing you really cannot forget when you are amending your beds? Well, we talked about cutting things down to the root, putting air in the soil by aerating, pulling out weeds. The other thing that is really important is the amending process. Now, think about the soil being just like your body. You have to replenish the electrolytes you lose during a workout. You eat food every single day to replenish all of the things that you've burned during the day. Soil is the exact same way. This is our key recipe that we've formulated over the years that we really like for amending our beds to guarantee that it's really healthy from a holistic standpoint to keep the soil growing, new microbes, new bacteria, new fungus, keeping all of the things in the soil web alive so that our plants can really be drought tolerant, less prone to disease, and just happy in general. So the three things in our recipe for success is a good granular fertilizer. This is a particular brand we love. Worm castings, so basically worm poop, very important. And then lastly, worm tea. So this is like you take a probiotic for your stomach, it's a probiotic for the soil to put back in bacteria that you've taken out. Now these three things are added in addition to compost. Compost is king. You always want to add compost back into your soil every time you amend it at a season change, because that's going to put back in the organic matter that broke down over that season and continue to give your soil a healthy, thriving ecosystem of microbiology, so bacteria, fungus, arthropods. Finally, after you have aerated your bed, you have amended your bed, you added all the key products that you need, including compost, you've watered really well. Remember, back at the beginning, I said there's two things that soil really needs to thrive. That is air and moisture. So make sure you put moisture back in the soil if your bed is really dry. Lastly, even if you're not going to plant that day, put mulch on top of your soil to conserve the moisture that you put in, and also to help regulate the temperatures. Here in zone 9 and 10 in late fall, it can get super hot. These raised beds can really bake. By putting a nice layer of mulch on top, you're going to keep that soil nice and cool, conserve moisture, and keep the microbes alive until it's ready for you to plant. Now, a common question we get all the time is, after you've mulched and you've amended and you've put in your compost and your fertilizer and all of those things, when you do go to plant, do you fertilize again? Well, it's important to note that I mentioned a granular fertilizer. A granular fertilizer is very slow to break down and is going to be available to your plants in the soil for a very long period of time. When you go to plant, you want to use a liquid organic fertilizer because that's going to be available to the plants immediately. The roots will take that up very quickly and will give that plant a boost in the very beginning of its life, when it's the youngest and the most tender and the most likely to not thrive if it doesn't have enough food in the soil. All right, well, now you know everything you need to do to turn your beds over to have a very successful season. These are the steps we use on the farm and in the garden. So they're steps that really work. Now just remember, there may be nuances for your garden beds, but those are the basic steps that are going to make you the most successful. All right, if you love this content, make sure you like and subscribe so that we can help you have the best garden possible. And I would love for you to comment on this video and tell me, what are the things that you use to amend your garden beds that you swear make a really big difference in your garden or on your farm? Now just remember, no matter how you turn over your beds every single season, the key is that you're replenishing what you took out. You're amending the soil to replenish all the things that those plants use that season. For us, that's compost, fertilizer, worm casting, and worm tea. That is the 4 things that makes a really big difference in our crop every single year. Now, if you're not sure what compost to get or what fertilizer to get, there's a lot of options out there. Luckily for you, we have some of our favorite products online, in particular our fertilizer, our worm castings, both available for you to purchase so you can amend your beds just like us and have a really good garden season.